Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This beautiful river sometimes so dangerous.
River tragedy, a reminder of the dangers of local waterways after a fisherman drowns in the Capilano. Also,
we all have homes here. Who's going to buy our house? No one's going to buy it when our mills are shutting down.
Hanging by a thread, BC's forestry crisis has families scrambling, and
I did not expect that in my lifetime.
prickly and poisonous. A rare fish turns up on a Vancouver Island beach.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. We begin tonight with breaking news. If you take the bus or C-bus, your commute could soon come to a grinding halt.
Metro Vancouver transit operators have just issued 72-hour strike notice. Dan Bird's here live now. So, Dan, what's the earliest we could see job action?
After Thursday evening at midnight. And the union isn't yet saying what job action we could see. It could be work to rule or rolling strike action. Earlier this month, members of Unifor voted overwhelmingly in favor of a strike. It represents 5,000 workers, including bus drivers, C-bus workers, and maintenance staff here in Metro Vancouver. That came after the union said talks broke down. Unifor says overcrowding on buses means drivers don't have time to use the washroom, much less eat at the end of a run. Wages are also an issue, among other things.
Okay, Dan, this is a pretty big deal. So when was the last time we saw bus drivers go on strike?
Quite a while ago, Anita, all the way back in 2001, 18 years ago. Now, what happened then was that strike lasted 4 months, and drivers were eventually legislated back to work by the province. It's too early to tell if that's going to happen here. Unifor says it is willing to negotiate all week to reach a deal. But at the moment, we just don't know what exactly will happen with this job action. We'll have to wait and see, and perhaps this may bring the parties together. We'll be reaching out to TransLink and Coast Mountain, and we'll have the latest for you at 11.
Dan Burt live for us tonight. Thanks, Dan.
A deadly mishap at a local river is renewing calls for people to be more careful on our waterways.
Yesterday afternoon, a fisherman drowned after falling into the Cap River.
As Deborah Goebel reports tonight, first responders are returning to the scene with advice for outdoor enthusiasts.
In this second, one of them float, gone.
For more than 20 years, Reza Jabari has been fishing along the Capilano River, standing on steep rock faces and looking down on raging water. He says he's careful, but he's seen many who are not.
First time or second time, they don't know this beautiful river sometimes so dangerous.
Jabari was there yesterday when the two young men fell in the river. He helped with the rescue.
Hook is a snag to the rock. He go to take the hook and bobber out. The second friend, he go to help him.
The man who died was wearing hip waders, he says, and that may have weighed him down. The friend who jumped in after him was somehow able to cling to a large boulder in the river.
His back to the rock was until here. Then I told them when I was close to him, hey, stand up and open your hands, catch the rock, don't panic, we help you, stay there.
Jabari says anglers fall in far more often than ever gets reported to police.
9 times I catch the people from this river, but no media, no photographer. I was alone, or that guy alone, or maybe 3 people was there. But
did you rescue them?
Yes.
Another regular fisherman here along the Capilano gave us this video of a man falling in.
Oh! Some dude just fell in. Some dude just fell in.
There are numerous videos on YouTube and Instagram of anglers taking risks. More than 20 first responders were at the Capilano River on Sunday participating in the rescue. Safety, they say, should always come first.
The biggest thing for us is to make sure that they have a personal flotation device on, whether it's a PFD or a life jacket, to be out there with a friend or with a couple of people.
But back at the river today, no one seems to be wearing a life jacket or a personal floating device. Jabari says it's very rare to see one. North Van RCMP and district firefighters plan to make a visit to the Capilano River Tuesday. They're hoping to meet with local anglers to talk safety as they fish. Deborah Goebel, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Well, it's been a crushing year for BC's forest industry. 25 mill closures or shutdowns, 6,000 people out of work.
Sawmills around our province have stopped operating because of falling lumber prices and a lack of raw materials.
Tonight, Greg Rasmussen takes us to Mackenzie, a town built on the lumber industry, struggling to survive.
It's a scramble on the production line, turning out lumber for the U.S. housing market. But these workers have an uncertain future, pinched by a lack of supply.
Out of this particular block, we would probably make 2 4-inch out of it.
The problem for mill owner Pat Glazier is he can't get enough raw material.
For a while, we were running 3 shifts. We kind of got down to 2 shifts. Now we're down to 1 shift and a bit. So we're trying to keep people employed. We do feel we have a future here with them, but we certainly didn't see this downturn coming.
The small waste cuts he depends on used to come from this nearby mill. It was shut by Canfor, which blamed lower prices for timber in the U.S., coupled with high operating costs in BC.
Heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking.
At this coffee shop, some of those laid off talk about the shock of the mill closing.
You've got deadlines for bills, you've got deadlines for when your EI is going to be done, you've got deadlines for when you have to find employment to support your family.
The lifeblood here is forestry, and without it, there's little hope for the future.
We all have homes here. Who's going to buy our house? No one's going to buy it when our mills are shutting down.
The people that are here, they want to be here.
Keeping young families in town inspired these women to form Mackenzie Matters, a group fighting to save the community. They fear a return to 2008, when all the local mills went silent, housing prices plummeted, and people fled.
Ghost town.
Yeah, it was
Everybody
really
left.
devastating.
It was awful. And we had tons of foreclosures, and it was just a grim time.
Yeah, it's too cold out here.
Those who remained persevered, even building a new community center. But now, fear has returned.
Because rural communities, it's like they want us to go by the wayside, and we don't want that to happen. We have a lot to offer.
They want the government to reduce the fees charged to companies cutting trees on publicly owned land. The group took us on this helicopter tour to help make their case, showing the wealth of trees and infrastructure, and these stacks of logs. They were cut in local forests, but instead of being processed here, they're being shipped to other mills hundreds of kilometers away.
Those are our jobs driving away.
Yeah, 100%.
Those are our jobs. They should have been milled here.
But the logs continue to go. Sent off to other mills, the companies have decided to keep operating, while people here are left to wait and wonder in the shadow of a sector in decline. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Mackenzie.
And in an effort to save the forest industry, there's been fallout elsewhere.
The province has redirected funds from the popular Rural Grant Program. And as Balpuri reports, it means a trail building initiative for First Nation youth has been stalled.
Berms and mounds wind through 7 kilometers of forest.
There was a lot of young people that were in there that are doing the work, clearing the paths.
In recent years, similar trails have been built across BC by the Aboriginal Youth Mountain Bike Program, a non-profit which employs dozens of Indigenous youth for months at a time.
I see everyone actually liking the trails and having fun. It's one thing to build it and have fun yourself, but it's another for other people to say, yeah, it's fun.
Funding comes from the province's Rural Dividend Program, $25 million a year to diversify economies. The Squawaluk First Nation was set to receive $100,000 to expand its 2-year-old project starting next month. Suddenly, though, there's no money, no project, and no jobs. The government has redirected the rural dollars to communities suffering from mill closures and cutbacks.
The idea of this park was also to eventually contribute to our economic development. You know, as you know, Indigenous communities are always looking for opportunities to be self-sufficient.
No one disputes forestry workers need help, but in an ironic twist, the funds have been taken from a program that regularly employs them to train youth in trailblazing. Now that hiring won't happen.
It's a scenario where you're ripping the Band-Aid off of one problem and trying to apply it to another. I think it's the kind of short-term decision making that doesn't always result in the outcomes that you're hoping for.
This isn't the only program left in the lurch.
Applications were submitted for a number of projects in at least 6 different communities across the province. The loss of funding means the loss of winter work for dozens of Aboriginal youth. Because as it stands now, none of these projects are going forward anytime soon.
Provincial Forest Minister Doug Donaldson declined a CBC interview. In an email, staff wrote the province knows the reallocation of funding is disappointing for many communities, but there has not been another industry in BC that has experienced significant job loss like forestry. Applications already submitted to the fund will be considered when the program is up and running again. There are fears that may not happen until 2021.
When it's not new money that's coming in and just repositioning money, it creates more problems, I think, than it solves.
The Squawaluk will hunt for other funding, but for now, the project has reached the end of the trail. Belle Puri, CBC News, Agassiz.
The owners of a Vancouver whiskey bar are suing the province after inspectors seized hundreds of bottles of liquor from them last year. BC's Liquor Control Branch raided Fett's Whiskey Kitchen in January of 2018. The branch says the owners were buying booze from private retailers, a violation of provincial regulations. A total of 242 bottles of specialty liquor were seized. Now the owners want the bottles back, saying the raid was conducted without a warrant and that the hearings that followed the raid were prejudged and unfair. The Liquor Board has yet to respond to the court filings.
Dozens of farmers showed up to protest at the BC legislature today, angry about changes to the Agricultural Land Reserve. Protesters say they were blindsided by changes brought in by the NDP that restrict the number of homes on a property and their size. They also increased penalties for dumping waste on farmland and restrict secondary businesses on farms. These changes reverse the previous Liberal government's moves in the ALR.
Is a lot. The government is asking a lot of us, they're expecting a lot of us, and they're not providing us any security. And we're here to stand up against that.
The government says the changes were necessary to protect farmland for food production.
Well, if you use the Granville Bridge, be aware repairs are starting today, and they are expected to cause delays. It's part of the $35 million seismic and structural upgrade already underway. 2 lanes will be closed in both directions, as will 1 lane on the Hemlock ramp because of work on the southern approach. More work will start in late November on the Seymour ramp at the north end of the bridge. The bridge, which was built in 1954, will stay open despite the closures. The work is expected to be finished by the end of next year.
Well, with ridership on the rise, TransLink is proposing 2 new bus routes from Metrotown, and the public's invited to consult on the proposal starting today. The first route would run along Willingdon to Phibbs Exchange, connecting North Vancouver to Brentwood SkyTrain Station and BCIT. The second would run from Metrotown's Expo Line Station to Vancouver's River District. If approved, the new routes could begin as early as next year. You can take the online survey until November 11th at translink.ca. There will also be an information session next Wednesday at the River District Neighborhood Center.
Well, a rare tropical find on a beach near Souk has scientists abuzz. Take a look at this. This is the first time a spotted porcupine pufferfish has been seen north of San Diego. It is dead now, but it somehow made its way all the way west to the west coast of Vancouver Island. Scientists at the Royal BC Museum and the Vancouver Aquarium think it may have gotten into the warm pool of ocean water known as the Blob and succumbed as the water around it got cold.
We've had triggerfish, we've had luvar, so it's not unusual to get this sort of thing, especially on a warm year. El Nino years also bring up weird fish, so it's just very cool to get a pufferfish.
You know, global warming and climate change. We might start seeing strange things washing up on our shores, foreign invaders of some kind. This one happened to be not alive, but some things might survive.
The exotic fish is going into the Royal BC Museum's research collection, where they hope it remains a rarity. But both the museum and the aquarium welcome calls about any unusual finds. I'm not sure I need to see any more of those fish.
No, prickly, poisonous.
Yeah.
Poor little
Vacant
poor
eyes.
little fella ended up here, yes. Oh, you're talking about the, not Brad.
not
Oh, you're talking
Brad,
about
the
the fish. Yeah, right. He's not prickly or poisonous, but I did hear a lot of people kind of complaining how cold it is today.
That's right. It was a bit of a frosty morning to start today, and this was including the city of Vancouver, barely going above the freezing mark. But really, of all of the things to be complaining about right now, I think that's going to be low down on the list. It's actually quite nice. I want to show you what it looked like, actually. First thing this morning, this is a picture of a beautiful frosty-looking leaf here. This was taken in North Vancouver, right along the Spirit Trail there, and it was definitely just about that freezing mark. So this is going to be the trend as we move into tomorrow. And our current temperatures right now, they certainly did recover. We're looking at temperatures right around 7 or 8 degrees largely across the region. But with these clear skies that we are going to be seeing throughout the overnight and throughout much of the week, it is going to be a very chilly morning again tomorrow. So definitely a day to be bringing out those mitts, maybe a thicker jacket, anything like that, because first thing, come 7, 8 o'clock, we could be seeing temperatures right about 0. Now the afternoon, it's going to be a different story. We're going to struggle to see those temperatures get into the double digits. By contrast, it's probably going to be much closer to about 7 or 8 degrees. However, still plenty of sunshine in the forecast from now, really, until the end of the week. So there's a lot to look forward to here.
Okay, Brett, thanks. Talk to you again in a bit.
Sounds good.
And a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs.
And CBC Vancouver also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Canadian seniors being kicked out of government-run facilities. Coming up, the BC woman discharged from a mental illness treatment program and left with nowhere to go.
Thanks so much for joining us online, where we are, of course, commercial-free. A Vancouver woman was counting her blessings this past weekend.
That's for sure. She's lucky to be alive after a large tree fell on top of her following Friday's big windstorm. As Eva Yugwen-Senge reports, she has quick-thinking neighbors to thank.
There was no warning when this 24-meter elm tree snapped and fell. Jacqueline Pfeffer was jogging by when it happened Friday afternoon.
And I thought it was really windy. I wasn't going to go in the forest. I was going to go down to the beach. Next thing I know, I hear a crack and like what seemed like a black wall come down on me.
56-year-old Pfeffer was pinned down. She couldn't move or breathe. All she could do was call for help before passing out.
But luckily, my neighbor, he just barely heard me, came and then heard me again. The last thing he heard me say was, "I can't breathe."
Dale Pugh called 911 right away. He then grabbed his chainsaw and set to work freeing Pfeffer.
And then just started cutting the limbs of the tree. And right away the fire department arrived, and we continued pulling limbs off until they were able to pull her out from underneath the fence.
He used a construction jack to lift some of the weight of the tree off of her.
If he wouldn't have heard me, nobody could see me under there. So I would have probably would have died. So I'm very thankful to him.
I think anybody would do that if they are in that situation. I mean, the main thing was finding her.
Pfeffer spent the night in hospital. The tree fractured her ribs in 11 places and bruised her heart. Wind gusts peaked at 78 kilometers an hour on Friday, causing downed trees, power outages, and ferry cancellations. Vancouver streets are lined with old elm trees like these on West 13th, and neighbors are worried they could be rotted and dangerous.
So I think the city really needs to evaluate the safety and the health of the trees on this street and assess whether they should be cutting them down and planting new trees.
The Vancouver Park Board says it inspects each street tree annually to make sure they're safe. It says this particular tree didn't show any signs of rot and fell because of Friday's high winds. Staff will keep inspecting to see if something else caused it to snap. Eva Yugwen-Senge, CBC News, Vancouver.
Scary stuff.
Caused a lot of damage, a lot of delays on the ferries, and away it went.
I was stuck on the SkyTrain delay. A tree came down on the line.
Because of the wind?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. All right, we'll be back in just a few moments with the latest headlines from across the country. Vancouver Island senior is speaking out after being kicked out of a government-run mental health facility and left to live in a tent with rats.
And as Rosa Marcatelli with Go Public tells us tonight, it seems the evictions are happening more often than we know.
Yeah, we got to hide the tent better.
At an age where most people are thinking about retirement, Judy Trask is living in a tent hidden in the bushes of a Victoria public park.
So you got your things in there?
Trask spent a year living in her own apartment in a building that was part of a government-run mental health treatment program. In March, she was kicked out and forced out onto the street after staff decided she wasn't doing well in the program, saying the 110-pound or 50-kilogram 65-year-old was verbally aggressive and threatening towards staff.
I mean, my God, they think you're just human cattle.
Trask suffers from suicidal depression, PTSD, and a severe anxiety disorder. Carolina Tudela met her while working as a volunteer for a homeless drop-in center after Trask called in asking for help dealing with rats in her tent.
She lives in constant fear that she's going to be kicked out of the mat she's got, or that she's going to be raped at night. That's a big fear of hers.
Experts estimate 35,000 people are homeless in Canada on any given night, and 15% of those suffer from mental illness. This researcher worked on one of the largest mental health service trials ever done in Canada. It found stable housing is the most important thing when treating mental illness.
The system is broken when we don't have the resources to deal with the most complex persons.
As for Trask, she remains homeless with limited access to the mood-stabilizing medications she needs.
What most outrages me is just the indifference and the callousness. I mean, this is a senior citizen. Judy has, mental health problems.
Go Public asked the health authority in Trask's case if it plans to help her. It didn't answer, citing confidentiality rules. To date, though, no one has contacted Trask or her advocate offering help. The health authority did confirm that it does discharge people with mental illness onto the streets. It says it does it rarely and as a last resort. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
A warning tonight to wild mushroom foragers to be very careful after a huge spike in mushroom poisonings in the province this year. The BC Centre for Disease Control has already received more than 200 reports of wild mushroom poisonings. The rainy weather has delivered a bountiful supply. Among them are the ominously named death cap mushrooms, an invasive species from Europe growing across the southern coastal regions. They resemble other edible mushrooms, but can lead to liver and kidney damage and even death.
The death of a Chilliwack senior is prompting calls for more to be done when elderly people go missing.
You've probably heard of Amber Alerts when a child is abducted, but as Tina Lovegreen reports, some families say BC should also implement a Silver Alert system.
Here's hiking with my brother.
John Pop was a mining engineer, originally from Romania, with love for the outdoors. But at 79, he was living with Alzheimer's.
I would say his mind was more like a 2-year-old. Of course, with good days and bad days.
On Tuesday, the family's usual safeguards failed. His GPS watch was being repaired and the door alarm didn't go off.
He walked up the trail and he slipped off and ended up in the bottom.
It took 4 days to find him. His family wonders if he'd still be alive if more people knew he was missing.
It took probably at least 24, 48 hours for the word to go out.
So he was about mid-stage when he left home.
Sam No has been pushing for a province-wide Silver Alert system for 6 years, ever since his father went for a walk in 2013 and was never seen again. Similar to the Amber Alerts for missing children, it would be for seniors with dementia.
Missing person with Alzheimer's disease or dementia is an absolute emergency. So the chances of survival starts to decrease after 24 hours.
Some individual jurisdictions have a similar system, like Winnipeg, but there are no provincial programs. The province says it's considered implementing a Silver Alert system, but police have warned of amber fatigue, that too many alerts would be sent out and the public could become desensitized. But No says there is an easy workaround.
I think there should be a geo-targeted approach where if someone has gone missing in Chilliwack, there's no reason to notify the whole province of British Columbia.
He had any.
In most cases, seniors with dementia who wander don't go far, like John Pop. And if the alert could help find them alive,
Any life matter, no matter what age they are.
his daughter says it would be worth it. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Chilliwack, BC.
Is the future of rural communities in BC in jeopardy? Why the forestry crisis has some families in shambles. Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I yelling like a crazy.
The drowning of a fisherman at the Capilano River is renewing calls for safety tonight. Rescuers asking people to be more careful on our waterways. They're planning to meet with local anglers to ensure life jackets are being worn.
Metro Vancouver transit operators have issued 72-hour strike notice. That includes bus drivers, C-bus workers, and maintenance staff. If an agreement isn't reached by Thursday at midnight, job action could range from work to rule or rolling strike action.
it's just very cool to get a puffer fish.
It's the first time it's ever been seen north of San Diego. A poisonous spotted porcupine fish has turned up on a Vancouver Island beach. Researchers believe the fish has strayed because of warming waters. It could be a signal of climate change.
Another look now at one of our top stories, turmoil and uncertainty in British Columbia's forestry sector. So far this year, some 24 mills have shut down, leaving more than 6,000 people unemployed.
4 communities built around those mills. The fallout is devastating, and there is no end in sight. Forest industry analyst Russ Taylor explained to the CBC the factors that led to the collapse and what the future might hold.
The first driver has been the decreasing log supply in the BC interior, and that's been predicted for a long time. We predicted it back in 2010, and so now we're well into that whole phase where we've had now about 20 sawmills closed since 2010, and with more reductions coming because of the mountain pine beetle. Mountain pine beetle epidemic killed about 60% of all the pine trees in BC. That's about 20% of all the timber. So the peak infestation was in 2004. The wood lasts about 10 to 12 years. So you get to 2018, 2019, now the wood's disappearing, and the volume is impacting about 30 sawmills so far year to date that have closed since 2006 because the logs aren't there, simply put. So when you lose 20% of your overall timber supply, we had about 95 mills. You're going to lose about 30 mills because they're all smaller mills. So almost a little over 20% of your mills is because the wood's not there. So if you don't have the logs, you don't have the mills, you don't have the jobs. Lumber markets have also collapsed. We hit record prices last year in 2018, way off the charts, and then we had a massive collapse. Since fourth quarter of 2018, we have seen prices at way below cost levels, or at or below cost levels for all of this period ever since. So the mills are bleeding red ink. They're having to pay more for their logs because the logs are scarce, and they're having to curtail as a result. It's always been a boom bust industry. So in my career, spanning over 40 years, I've been through a lot of tough times, and I don't recall one like this where everything just ganged up on the BC industry, where the high-cost producer, we're the ones shutting down most of the mills, and neighboring provinces like Alberta are skating through it all, and part of that's to do with the stumpage system. They have a different stumpage system. In BC, we're paying almost a super stumpage right now, and it'll get offset down the road, but that's not much comfort for those that are not working right now because of the way the system works. And we're tied very heavily to the U.S. with our stumpage system and our forest policies. The government's implying that their hands are tied, which to some degree they are, but there has to be some solutions out there that are worth talking about. Looking ahead, so once you have all this pain, it will get better. We think actually next year, because of all the curtailments and because U.S. demand never picked up this year, it was stalled by weather problems. Next year we expect, well, weather we don't know about, but we expect that demand should be good, and we do see firmer prices where mills can operate in BC, even though they're high-cost producers. So it looks good next year, but you have to get through the rest of this year, which I don't see any improvement.
6:33, a live look across at the North Shore from our CBC Vancouver studios in Hamilton and West Georgia. Well, if you like today's weather, you're going to love Brett's forecast. He's here with that next.
CBC Vancouver is proud to be hosting Indigenous Junior J School November 13th. We've invited Indigenous students from across the Lower Mainland to come and learn all about a career in journalism. For more information, head to cbc.ca/BC.
The state of California is under siege at both ends. In the south, wildfires are encroaching on the wealthy neighborhoods in Los Angeles.
And in the north, windy conditions have worsened the already massive blaze raging in wine country. 200,000 people have been forced to flee their homes in Sonoma County. About 2.5 million people have no electricity, and nearly 100 buildings have been destroyed, with thousands more under threat. On Sunday, the governor declared a state of emergency. High winds are adding to the woes as crews battle to contain multiple fires right across the northern part of the state. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, a fast-moving brush fire destroyed several homes near the Getty Museum. Officials say a mix of dry and windy conditions are causing the fires to spread more quickly. As Kim Brunhuber explains tonight, conditions are so bad, every spark could eventually start a new fire.
5 days after it first ignited, the massive Kincaid fire in Northern California is still a monster. The blast furnace winds have spread the fire so quickly, some residents went from seeing the smoke on the horizon to being surrounded by flames in minutes.
It was fire on both sides, really high fire, right? And the wind was swirling and all the ashes were going around my car.
Over the weekend, firefighters actually lost ground. Containment went from 10% to 5%.
You cannot fight this. Please evacuate. If you're under an evacuation order, you must leave.
The thousands who have been forced out had little time to pack.
We were hesitant to leave, but since we have to leave, so we grabbed the dog and the bird.
With fires raging throughout California, the governor has declared an emergency across the state. The latest fire sprung up early this morning near the Los Angeles community of Brentwood, forcing some to run for their lives.
It's literally on the hill right next to us.
Including hundreds of students at a nearby university and some celebrities like LeBron James. 500 firefighters are still trying to save homes in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. Too late for some.
You can see here in front of me a row of homes still smoking. They're among the handful of houses destroyed early this morning.
The famous Getty Art Museum was untouched. And from the north, more good news. The winds that had fueled the catastrophic Kincaid fire have slowed. A much-needed respite, firefighters say, before the winds pick up again tomorrow. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Brett Soderholm joins us now. And Brett, you have been watching the California situation quite carefully. What are you seeing in terms of weather?
Yeah, there's no two ways to say this. It really is just a scary situation, and the weather is not going to be cooperating over the next 2 days. An already bad situation is unfortunately almost certainly going to be getting worse. The map behind me, this is issued from the National Weather Service in the States. They have a special warning called a red flag warning. That means that conditions are just absolutely perfect for wildfires to ignite and to spread. This is the case when winds are expected to be sustained at least 24 kilometers an hour, and when it's quite dry. So we're talking when relative humidity is lower than about 25%. And in addition to that, the temperature needs to be at about 23.5 degrees. So all across California, both in the north and the south, these conditions are not only met, but are expected to be getting even worse. I wanted to emphasize at the beginning here what we're talking about for northern portions of the state. The worst day by far is going to be tomorrow. We are looking at sustained winds in the areas where we see these fires potentially at 60 kilometers an hour, gusting potentially to 100, but by far the most concerning situation here is what's going to be happening in Santa Monica and Los Angeles on Wednesday afternoon. These are sustained winds at 74 kilometers an hour, gusts potentially hurricane force at 130 kilometers an hour. So even if the winds, if the fire situation was not as bad as it was, this would still be enough to bring down trees and power lines themselves. So we are not looking very good. In terms of what we have closer to home, however, we are going to be dealing with a little bit of wind throughout the evening. Nothing compared to Friday, but fairly strong northeasterly wind is going to be passing throughout the overnight period. We're looking at winds potentially gusting up to about 50 kilometers an hour. But beyond that, we're looking at a very clear weather pattern for the next few days. This area of high pressure that's presently over the Pacific Ocean, that's going to be making its way on land over the next few days. It is going to be keeping those temperatures quite on the chilly side, lots of clear skies. But on the plus side, well, all of that rain and snow is going to be sticking far to the north of the province, or even just going directly up to Alaska. So it's going to be not that much of a weather story here for us. As I mentioned, those overnight lows well below freezing, parts of the East Kootenay getting down into the minus teens with wind chill values already at minus 20. But for our 5-day forecast here, a little below seasonal for the next few days. We're looking at single-digit highs, but still lots of sunshine from now all the way into the weekend. So just bundle up first thing in the morning. Otherwise, you'll be fine.
Looking great. Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
A violent weekend in Winnipeg. Why the city is seeing the highest number of murders in 7 years. That's after the break.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Get your tickets to the Chutzpah Festival today. Catch culturally diverse performances in comedy, music, theater, and dance at this one-of-a-kind festival. And join CBC Vancouver's Mike Killeen on November 5th as he hosts this year's Power 50. He'll reveal this year's movers and shakers, according to Vancouver Magazine. For more on these events, check us out online.
It has been a violent weekend in Winnipeg. 3 homicides in just 24 hours.
And as Marina von Stackelberg reports, people living there are on edge.
This is where a Halloween party turned deadly. 2 teenage girls stabbed. One of them, a 14-year-old, is dead. Winnipeg's youngest homicide victim this year.
I think a 14-year-old being murdered is absolutely horrible. Kind of took my breath away this morning.
Just a few hours later, at a back alleyway downtown, police found 2 men suffering serious upper body injuries. Their deaths now ruled a double homicide. Police believe they were attacked by someone else. There have been 36 homicides so far this year in Winnipeg, the highest murder toll in 8 years. Police say there is no one specific reason why.
Certainly there is gang activity, but it's not an ongoing feud that's fueling a series of homicides. No, it's tragically just random.
Police do say, as in other parts of Canada, they are seizing a significantly higher number of firearms this year.
Incidents like this don't necessarily mean that things are becoming much less safe in Winnipeg.
This criminologist says most homicide victims have a connection to their killer, and you're at greater risk if you're involved in hard drugs or crime.
These rates do fluctuate, and our personal safety is really not at any greater risk, provided that we aren't involved in the very risky lifestyles that are tied to the potential to be a victim of violent crime.
As police investigated Saturday night's homicides, a shooting on Sunday afternoon, police believe a man with a shotgun went into a home. 4 people, including a baby, were sent to hospital, but are all expected to survive.
I kiss my kids when I leave, just in case, you know. That's how it's become in the city.
Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A licensed hemp farmer says TD Bank froze his business accounts and accused him of engaging in illegal activity.
He says he'd provided the bank with all the necessary licenses, but as John Lancaster explains in this exclusive story, the farmer believes he was flagged because of the way he looked.
Akeem Gardner harvests hundreds of acres of industrial hemp, which he sells to companies who make plant-based textiles, foods, and building materials. But the operation ground to a halt earlier this month when TD Bank froze his business account after he asked the bank to transfer $35,000 to a vendor to pay for equipment.
I was incorrectly flagged as someone who was doing illicit business. They told me that they were shutting down my account and they weren't going to let me operate anymore because I was running a business that the bank didn't support.
Gardner says he provided the bank with his Health Canada hemp license when he applied for his business account almost a year ago, and says he previously moved money at the bank with no issues. But in those prior visits, he'd usually worn business clothes.
This time I went in with my hoodie and my toucan and obviously a 6'4" black guy, right?
TD won't say why Gardner's account and credit card were frozen, only that the transaction was flagged. It does concede there was a, quote, misunderstanding about Gardner's business. A misunderstanding, Gardner says, that's cost him time and money.
Because TD froze my credit card, so everyone who was charging my credit card account, like my farm insurance and so on and so forth, they all got declined.
TD Bank says it continues to investigate what happened. As for Gardner, he's moved his money to another bank.
A lot of these assumptions are made when it comes to minorities that are trying to do good work or legal work in this industry. And that's what was shocking to me about this.
John Lancaster, CBC News, Orangeville, Ontario.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson failed to trigger an election with a vote in Parliament today. He says he'll give it another shot tomorrow. It's part of his plan to finally get Brexit passed.
Britain was due to pull out of the European Union Thursday, but as the CBC's Margaret Evans explains, this prolonged saga just got even longer.
But across the country, there is a widespread view that this Parliament has run its course.
So began the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's attempt at calling a general election for December 12th. A bid, he said, to break the deadlock over Brexit in Parliament.
Order!
But to do it without any amendments to his election bill, he needed a 2/3 majority, and he didn't get it. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, accusing him of trying to force his EU withdrawal bill through Parliament ahead of an election.
Mr. Speaker, we have a Prime Minister who will say anything, do anything to get his way. And today he wants an election and his bill. Well, not with our endorsement.
Today, the European Union, as expected, eased the pressure a bit by granting the United Kingdom another extension, this one until the end of January, avoiding for now the possibility of Britain crashing out of the bloc on Halloween. Boris Johnson has repeatedly staked his credibility on a pledge to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union by the end of this month. Downing Street's message in the face of failure: blame the British Parliament. Johnson's strategists have clearly made up their minds that the voting population will do just that and change the Parliament's makeup in his favor. He's ahead in opinion polls, at least for now.
You know, in 2017, we had a snap election when Theresa May was riding high in the polls, and a lot of people thought she'd be able to increase her majority, but instead she actually lost her majority and returned a minority government.
But clearly undeterred by recent history, Johnson says he'll make another attempt at getting an election bill through Parliament tomorrow. The short days of autumn here, already feeling very long. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
A group in Calgary is taking a unique approach to housing homeless veterans.
They're building a village of tiny but fully functional homes. The first round of tenants are expected to move in this week.
Aaron Collins gets an early look inside Calgary's first Veterans Village.
It's designed to look and feel like a military barracks. 15 tiny homes built on 3 residential lots in Calgary. This is the Homes for Heroes Village, a first of its kind in Canada, custom built to house homeless vets. This village inspired by the need Dave Howard saw when he visited his grandfather, a Second World War veteran who suffered from PTSD and struggled to find the help he needed.
What I saw was that somebody that served our country, he came back broken, and we weren't there to help.
Well, there are 15 tiny homes here. Future villages will contain 20 at a cost of between $3.5 and $5 million, all raised through donations.
Canadians are very passionate about helping those that serve. And this village is really a testament to that.
As the finishing touches are put on this facility, another one is being built in Edmonton. First steps to address a pressing need across the country.
It's a beautiful spot. How many of these do we need in Canada?
We need 300-400 of these in Canada to solve the issue. If we get them, we can solve it.
Right now.
Right now.
The homes are compact and functional. So far, the hardest part about finding tenants for them has been convincing vets they deserve them.
They don't feel as though they're deserving of anything. And the position they're in right now is their own fault.
Don McLeod should know he spent 30 years in the military before becoming the on-site counselor at the village. McLeod says losing the structure of a military life can be difficult for some vets.
It's not hard for them to end up into the street. Some just don't have those supports they lost when they left the military, and they don't know how to access them.
The hope is that these tiny structures can help bring big changes to some of Canada's veterans. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
We're learning more tonight about the U.S. operation that ended with the death of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Pentagon officials briefed reporters this afternoon, and there were new revelations about prisoners taken during the raid.
There were 2 adult males taken off the objective alive, and they're in our custody.
Officials also confirming the existence of a video of the operation. They say it's currently being declassified. There were also some questions about al-Baghdadi's remains. They are unconfirmed reports of a burial at sea. Officials would only say the disposal of the remains was completed and that it was handled, quote, appropriately.
Well, Diwali has different meanings for different people. Still ahead, one of the biggest celebrations of the year for the South Asian community.
Tuesday on the Early Edition, it's closing in on 1 year since Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart was sworn in. Our municipal affairs reporter Justin McElroy sat down with the mayor to find out where he stands on his policy promises. We'll hear highlights of that tomorrow.
Well, it's one of the biggest celebrations of the year for the South Asian community, Diwali.
Yes, and while the festival has religious roots, as Gianpaolo Mendoza reports, it's a diverse holiday with different meanings to different people.
Happy Diwali!
It's called the Festival of Lights, and it's probably what most people are familiar with.
The fireworks! I love fireworks, so we get to see those in a minute.
Diwali celebrations kicked off here at this Hindu temple in Surrey. Hundreds crowded into the parking lot and temple grounds to celebrate with loved ones and even total strangers.
We have some friends and family that makes it special.
Diwali, it helps to meet people and the different culture come together and celebrate.
Diwali is one of the biggest celebrations of the year for Metro Vancouver's South Asian community. It's also celebrated in several major religions around the world and marks different histories for each faith. Just half a block away, members of Surrey's Sikh community were celebrating the liberation of one of their gurus from prison, a day they can share with their Hindu neighbors.
Crackers, food, yeah, and celebrations in the Gurdwara.
It's an event that attracts people from all backgrounds. People come for the fireworks, lanterns, and of course, the food.
Lots of variety food. We're making the chana bhatura, aloo tikki, and saron da saag, makki di roti. Lots of varieties here.
Diwali doesn't always fall along religious lines either. People say the most important parts go beyond faith and borders.
It's a festival of peace, sharing love, be with their families after years and years, get together, have some fun, closeness. It's all about love.
The celebrations continue the rest of the week. Gianpaolo Mendoza, CBC News, Surrey.
Anywhere you go in the world, it's really beautiful on Diwali if there are South Asians living in the community.
Celebrations going on. Canucks game the other night. It was a Diwali night. So that was fun.
It was good, other than the loss, but...
Other than the loss, but it was an entertaining game.
One of my favorite Diwali memories, though, I was riding on a train through India on Diwali night, and you could see every time you'd pass a village, it was just lit up with candles everywhere, and it was one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen. So, yeah.
All right, just a reminder that you can find this newscast online at cbc.ca/BC. Dan's here at 11 o'clock right after the National.
Yes, we're leaving you tonight with a little Halloween pastry inspiration. These terrifying treats come to us from Punk Rock Pastries in North Burnaby. Pie brains, cupcakes.
Severed fingers, and a roast turkey dubbed It's the Turkaken, right? Yeah, nothing quite as it seems. Looks scrumptious.
Hot dog.
I think. Thanks
I don't
for
know.
watching.
Okay.
Have a good night.